All right, we're back with Brad Thor and Barrett Moore, and give me first the data point that we were talking about in the break.
The equipment one.
The NSA.
Okay.
The NSA.
Big picture. If you have sensitive data and you keep it on a computer, most of us use a computer as an electronic filing cabinet, as it might be, and we put down a variety of thoughts. If you have something that you want to have private and you're going to put it in a computer, make sure that computer is not hooked to the internet, period. Okay? That's the only way that you're ever going to keep that data secure. And in fact, that won't even keep it secure if you're really under scrutiny. But from a day-to-day standpoint,
Well, wait, how do they get it if it's not plugged into the internet?
Well, in the very most sophisticated sense, they have the ability to read a hard drive through the AC power lines.
Oh.
That's a program in itself.
I heard somebody. I was sitting in a meeting with somebody who tends to be paranoid for a living, and I was in my apartment in New York, and I had these big. You both have been there.
It's Don Imus you're talking about, isn't it?
Yes, have these big windows, and but I'm up, on the 50th floor in New York, and it's 2 blocks away from any of these other high rises. And we're sitting there, and I said, we were talking about something, and he said, have you had this glass tempered or whatever? And I said, I don't even know what that means. And he said, we can shoot now.
A parabolic microphone.
Yeah, he said, we can shoot like a laser or something at your window. And he said, you can't put music on because we can just take the algorithm of the song. We can take the algorithm of water. We know what it is. We just cancel it out. He said, we can hear your conversation no matter where you are at any time. He said, no, you got a window. He said, please. There's nothing that our government can't hear or can't do at this point.
That's correct. And but let me finish the thought on the technology.
All right.
Which is, here's the challenge for anyone. We're all familiar with having firewalls in our offices and our homes, and whether it's made by X or Y company, they're generally pretty good products. Well, 2 data points you need to know is, first of all, there is not a piece of technology that is sold in the United States that has not first been vetted by the intelligence services, and they have a manner in which to go through it. The second is, do you really think your, and I won't disparage a brand firewall that you bought for $100 is going to do anything when J.P. Morgan, who spends $500 million a year on network security, can't keep their network secure? So you got $100, you got $500 million, you know they're attacking the ATM systems. It's an absolute, banks are being devastated by this.
When Anonymous took down the DOJ and also took down, did you see what happened over Christmas? They took down, who was it? Some really, really big... Stratfor.
Yeah,
Stratfor is, you don't mess with Stratfor. Explain who Stratfor is.
Stratfor is a private intelligence service that, in essence, tries to allow clients to see over the horizon. They're taking some private and some public data, as it might be, and they're connected to the intelligence services.
Okay. Not losers.
No.
I subscribe.
Yeah,
I get the emails every day. It's great stuff. And they got my credit card, and then all of a sudden I got a charge from some little cafe over in Spain, and American Express was on the phone like instantly.
Right. So what they did is Anonymous crashed Stratfor, a security and something that you subscribe, but like Citibank, all these people, these big people subscribe because they want to be able to see over the horizon a little bit. So this is the top 1% of this country and of the world. Really big names. Anonymous went in over Christmas and hacked into it, and not only got all the security, they started making charges and started giving money away from these credit card numbers and just dumping them out. Now, it's not as bad to think that they broke in and took all this stuff. What struck me that night is I was laying in bed and I said, "Dear God Almighty." And my wife said, "What?" And I told her the story and she said, "Well, that's not going to sit well with those people." And I said, "No, let's play this out. You've just picked on some of the biggest, nastiest people out there. You are intentionally saying, 'Oh yeah? Am I touching your stuff?' Oh, does that bother? That implies these people either out of their mind or they've got it going on. Which is it?
Well, not only did they get the credit card numbers, they exposed the client list. I mean, it's easily searchable right now.
It's like the knock list. It's out in the open.
No, the 4,000 commercial customers that are name brand companies and government organizations that subscribe, it was all there. I think it was 4,040 names they exposed on day one. And, you know, that's not anyone's business whether you're a client of Stratford's or not. But
so what happens? So what happens to our world when you have people like this, like Anonymous, and then people, you can't tell me the Russian mob's not doing it. You got the United States government, you have Saudi Arabia, you have all these people coming after this information. Well, you're living in a world where there's no, the average person doesn't have a chance, do they?
Vigilance. I mean, if you're vigilant and you start now and you start building a program, you can reel it back a little bit. But an awful lot of damage has been done.
Okay, so where do you even start on that?
Well, that's as I was talking about when we had the last break. One of the things is, you know, a lot of people think of that they're leaving a trail out there, that it's a digital trail.
No, only weirdos like you think that. The average person doesn't think, am I leaving a trail?
Well, it's not a trail. I would say you actually have a digital shadow because it is following you everywhere you go. It's not where you've been. They're looking at where you are at right now. So as Barrett talks about, yes, there's a lot of us in this room that have been giving our Social Security number out willy-nilly, blah, 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 blah. There's a lot of that information you can't reel back in, but what you can do is make it very difficult for someone to find you going forward. You can change things. You can change the name that your utilities are under. There's a bunch of stuff you can do so that you throw some roadblocks down there. I don't think it would be nearly impossible for anyone to completely drop off the grid. You really have to know what you were doing. That takes some real knowledge about dropping off.
It took me over 10 years to train my wife.
Are you complete to train your wife?
Smart woman, but you know my wife.
I know your wife. I don't think she'd appreciate train my wife. You're going to be sleeping in a hotel tonight. Let me start there then. What if you want to completely fall off the grid?
If you're independent and wealthy, you can do it. If you got a job and you have to report to work, it's pretty darn hard, and there's a nexus to find you as it might be.
See, hang on just a second. This is the problem. I mean, the head of Facebook said about 2 or 3 years ago that all of our children, by the time the children that are now, I think Rafe was about 5 then, he said the kids who are really little now, he said by the time they're 25, they're going to have to change their name because they will not be able to handle all of the information that is out about them. So they're all going to have to just change their name, which I thought was, and he said it like, and we're going to be there to help you. And I thought that was really, really awful. I mean, you start breaking families apart with the names and everything else. It's really, really bad news. We're looking at this now as normal, relative normal times. The reason why this is so bad, one of the reasons why this is so bad is because look what happened in Missouri with the Tea Party. When Barack Obama first got in, they said that the Tea Party and anybody who voted for Ron Paul was a dissident. Well, if you get a country where they're saying that you, because you're a Tea Party member, you're a troublemaker, I mean, it's not that hard to believe that.
Janet Napolitano and what she said about veterans.
What did she say? I don't remember.
There was their report about right-wing extremism, the growth of right-wing extremism, and they were looking at people. So if you had the Gadsden flag, you fell into that category. If you were a returning veteran, you were potential and deserved the extra scrutiny.
I mean, they're already doing this, and the media is already laying that groundwork. The one reason why this is so bad is because they identify you, and as you said earlier, tell me about this, they can predict your movements. If Hitler had the technology that we have now, would there be a Jew on the planet?
No.
No. And how long would it have taken?
60 days.
Because they can predict where you're going. How many of us have toll pass? Yeah. Where do you think you're going? You know, I think of this all the time. Whenever you see a movie and they're like, you know, the obvious one, and the people are always in the movies, they're always doing the obvious one. They're like, okay, all right, I think we got in a way. And then you see somebody in the other room, I was just calling my wife to let her know. And you're like, you dummy. But it's not just that. You're going to throw away your cell phone if that would ever happen. But that's not how we're going to get. They're not going to catch you with a cell phone. They're not going to find you.
Let me tell you how bad it is. Brad mentioned American Express. In fact, let me just give a plug for Brad real quick, which is the reason people ought to read his books is they're not fiction. They are, I think you coined the word faction, which is they have real world elements in them. The manner in which his characters conduct themselves, the manner in which the operations take place are true. And you can look at them as entertainment, but you can also take notes and you can learn an awful lot by reading those books. He's the only guy in the market who does it.
You made me want to write Overton Window because I could do what you were doing. I'm like, all I have to do is come up with a story and show how all of this fits together, and it's all fact. Anyway.
Well, let me just finish the story. So I had a reason to call American Express, and we've all interacted with our banks or our financial institutions, and they have various ways of identifying yourself. Well, they had a new program which I had not run into, and I prided myself on knowing most of this stuff, and said, Mr. Moore, would you tell us the second car your sister ever owned and what the address was? And I thought quickly, well, first of all, how do you know I have a sister? Second of all, how do you know where she lives? And how in the world do you know what kind of car she used to have? So I had 3 data points they didn't get from me, but they had subscribed to a service that had mirrored that to know my sister, who of course is not as vigilant as I am in terms of public domain stuff, and they were using my sister's data to validate me to get into my own records. Absolutely sinister.
Terrifying.
It's relational databases at their worst. Well, like I told you, it's already done. There's nothing we can do to stop what's done. In fact, just to carry on for a moment, the children you mentioned. My children will never have a Facebook account. My children will never Twitter. My children will have no social media at all. Now, they have absolutely normal lives, but the ramifications of the judgments you make as a child carry on to hold on to the future as it might be. And they have no ability and no lens to look through to understand what's happening.
Tell me about the cell phones. This is the one thing that I think is great. Does anybody have an iPhone? Give me your iPhone. Does anybody have a regular cell phone, flip phone that is not an iPhone? Does anybody have one? Everybody else has iPhones?
BlackBerry. I'll give you my $20 AT&T, no chipped, no anything card phone.
All right, you're turning it off or on? Okay, so let me, turning it off. It's off. Can anybody listen to me?
Yes.
Yeah. They can absolutely listen to it while it's in the off position. The only way a cell phone is halfway safe is if you take the battery out. Take the battery out of your Apple. Oh, you can't. That's right. An Apple tracks all the time, even in the off position. It never is off. Back in just a second. When we went into break, we talked about the phone, and then there was something else, and like 6 things happened since. But there was. Well, go ahead.
How did you the clean computer? How
oh yeah. We were talking in the break about my wife. We were sitting and we were in New York, and I think we wanted to have Chinese food or something like that. And she said, "Okay, Chinese food." And she just types in Chinese food, and she says, "Okay." And I said, "Wait, what did you just do?" And she was using around me, and I'm like, Don't use around me, because that is GPS tracking you all the time. It is the greatest thing if you don't care, but it's tracking you all the time, and it's following you. It is. Do you remember the show Minority Report? Remember that movie?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's Minority Report. Yes. It's now no longer fiction. It's fact. When you walk by, it will tell you your likes and dislikes. But it also tells them right where you are all the time.
Which is why now, when you get your passport photo done, they are asking for a neutral expression. They don't want you to smile in passport photos. I don't know when's the last time you got a passport photo done, and they're doing that now in driver's license photos, because that is how they map the points on your face for facial recognition software. So that's then that's a whole what Barrett just threw to Glenn is a whole other thing too with these RFID chips.
That's a passport card.
I've never seen a passport card.
Well, that facilitates travel in North America, but the reason I gave it to you is it has an RFID chip in it, and you keep it in that. The problem with an RFID chip, it has a proximity reader ability to it. So literally, if you have a reader, I can walk by you in a crowd and read your ID information.
Somebody told me, the different guy who was at my house at a different time, he was telling me some of the things that we can do, and he said, Glenn, now I'm about 2 blocks away from a big high-rise that's about as tall as mine, and he said, Glenn, here we are sitting in your living room. He said, if you decided to pull out your credit card or your driver's license and it has the RFID on the back, he said, all you have to do is hand it to me. He said, if that magnetic back is towards the window, he said, I'm over there, I have it. I have everything. True or false?
True. No, wait, but let's qualify this. We're talking about some super specialized, very expensive equiment that is not readily available.
Yeah, he was speaking of federal government kind of stuff.
Yeah, there is no budget. There is no. But
this is, what is this, identity stronghold?
Yeah, that's just a sleeve, and what it does is it disrupts the RFID signal. And I keep my driver's license and my passport card in that, and a few other things. It's a pain to pull out occasionally, but I know that I'm never going to be subject to someone reading my ID in a crowd.
Who would be doing that?
I'd turn it around and tell you who isn't doing that today. Because we recently were in an establishment that had great surveillance, and I said to Brad, oh, great. You know, back on the grid as it might be, because in this location, we knew they used facial recognition software. So what that means is,
how do you know that?
How do I know?
How would I know that?
Well, you wouldn't know that, but let's back into that equation, which is the United States is going the way of Great Britain. Great Britain is the most surveilled society on Earth.
Ever.
I don't know what the ratio is today.
500 times a day, the average Londoner is picked up on a camera or scanned in some fashion. 500 times a day is the average.
Yeah, there's one camera. The last number I saw, they had 4.8 million cameras deployed in public spaces on the behalf of MI6 and the law enforcement. Now, that's slaved to, I mean, let's talk about the good versus the bad, because we don't want the show to be all bad. The concept is there are bad and evil people in the world, and if facial recognition software works in the right way, a bad guy walks into a public space who they're looking, he's on the most wanted list. Theoretically, they can't quite do this in all circumstances, but they're not far away. That bad guy is recognized, and the police is notified that Jim Jones, is there, and they go and pick him up. That's the good news.
That's the good news. He's not handing out Kool-Aid.
Yeah, they pick him up before something bad can happen.
Right.
The bad news is that there is a nexus that's created where I'm walking through a building with Brad Thor, and they create a nexus. Okay, Barrett Moore, Brad Thor, they know one each other, where they've come through this entrance and they're going to meet this particular group in this office building. What's that all about? Well, that's done simply because we know we're in the system. The system is identifying us and taking us back to a database.
This goes back to the beginning, that promise and tip.
And where do we draw the line as citizens in a free republic? Where do we draw the line? Well, guess what? If the police could come into my house or the military at any time during the day or night and rifle through my papers and personal effects, if they could do that to everybody, we'd live in the safest country, I'm sure, in the world. They'd be able to get every bad guy, ostensibly. But at what point do we say, you know what? This is not only the line is here, we need to push the line back. We've seen a lot of, we have very good men and women in our government who really, truly want to keep us safe. And we have a vicious, vicious enemy out there that wants to kill all of us. Not because of how much we have, just because we're not them. They just want us dead. But we have to talk about where is the line, because post 9/11, we've used terrorism to justify, I'm the biggest law and order, pro-military, pro-law enforcement guy you're going to meet, but this terrorism has been used to justify a lot, and there's a ton of court cases now, even now the Supreme Court ruled yesterday. The FBI and the White House were saying, you know what, we should be able to stick a GPS device under your car without a warrant.
But the good thing is,
that was a great blow for freedom.
Great blow for freedom.
They struck that down. They said that is a surge.
All nine said you can't do that.
They're going to ignore it. It won't be admissible in court, but they're going to ignore it.
I'm a little black rain cloud. You know?
The Constitution and the Bill of Rights are just merely impediments,
Okay.
and they threw them out years ago.
See, here's the problem. This is the kind of stuff that makes me want to vote for a libertarian like Ron Paul, because he's the only guy that really is saying these things. Everybody else does lip service to it. He actually believes this. I actually believe this. I think he goes a little farther than I go. But I'd rather give him the benefit of the doubt than Obama the benefit of the doubt. I'd rather, we should be more like George Washington and absolutely believe the worst in the people of Washington than the best of people in Washington. We've got the whole equation flipped around.
But you missed the point. They'll never let him get elected.
That sounds like a conspiracy theory.
I didn't
Who
say
is them?
that.
No, but who's them?
Think of the manner in which you're in the media. Think of the manner in which information is managed. Think of the manner in which stories coincidentally break. Look, whether it's political, geopolitical,
You know,
or
but
otherwise.
I have to tell you, as a guy who was pretty much out on a limb all by himself, me.
He had some friends.
I did, but I had some friends, but I had some pretty darn powerful enemies, really powerful enemies. I'm still standing. Why wouldn't they just taken me down? Or do you contend they did?
That's a subject for a whole nother show if you want to do that.
Well, no, I mean, you should invent something about me, which they never did. They smeared me. They called me names. They used the press to circle me. They did a number on me and they hurt me, but they never came out with anything like, there's no pedophile stuff. There's you can take somebody out.
Sure.
If you have this access, why hasn't it happened more often?
Well, there's a big philosophical discussion here, and one needs to have to understand how the law enforcement intelligence mechanism works. They are not there to suppress Americans. I mean, literally what we're seeing happening with total surveillance is almost involuntary. It's a byproduct of a system that was created, in essence, to secure the United States and protect us from our enemies. The problem, as you identified, is it gets into the wrong hands that subvert its intended
here's the
purpose.
problem. The average person, for instance, Rand Paul gets stopped at the airport. I put those pictures back up of what what they're scanning for. I don't want to live in a country that's doing that.
No.
That's totally wrong. I want to be secure on an airport. I think what's happened is we have disconnected from common sense. We are a country that relies always first on technology and not common sense. And so we just keep inventing and designing new software that gets worse and worse and worse and worse.
What?
And we disconnect from common sense. There's common sense ways. I get on a plane to go to Israel. I fly El Al every time. Every single time. Yeah. It might cost me more. It might be a bigger hassle. They kept me off the plane for 3 hours one time. God bless El Al. I know I'm landing in Jerusalem and I'm getting off that plane safe. They use common sense. They come and they talk to you. They ask you questions. So how do you feel about this? And if you don't like those questions, well, go fly American Airlines. Good luck with that. That's your choice. That's common sense. We don't do that. We just rely on technology.
And our enemies know that. As a matter of fact, in full black, when I talked about unrestricted warfare, that's exactly what they're doing. We use technology to drive our policy.
Let me briefly tell you a story that you'll laugh at, which is, this is a number of years ago when I was working for running a large security firm. And I was asked to come to have dinner with Governor Ridge, who was then the head of DHS. And to make a long story short, I generally carry a pocket knife, and that day I did not know I was traveling, and I had the pocket knife in my waistband. I happened to be running a security firm. I happened to be with 2 ex-members of Delta Force. We're going to have dinner with Governor Ridge, and I got arrested by the TSA and given the perp walk because I had a knife in my belt. So you talk about common sense, and it took a number of weeks and a lot of money to make that whole thing understand and go away, but we're one of the good guys.
I know.
And we got treated that way.
Okay. We started talking, and I started talking about all this technology and all the things that can happen. And there's really no way. Is there any way, if this system is ever really turned on against a group of people or individuals or whatever,
See his quote, from
1975. Senator Church, who was a progressive, said, "No way, America cannot mount another revolution."
Got it. So I said to you at the beginning, as you were talking about that quote, a blessing came to mind, because I do believe that God is involved. He is not neutral in the freedom of man. And the technology that we have, the things that we have going on, and what is on the horizon is so unbelievably horrific in the hands of the wrong people. It's devastation. Would you agree with that?
Correct.
Devastation. So how does God bless a people that have gone so far awry and are no longer listening to him? Anybody? Yes? Takes it away. Let me show you what I wrote down as the blessing that will never be considered a blessing. And it's the blessing that I fear the most, and in some ways expect the most, because it's the only way to truly save us from ourselves. EMP. An EMP would kill about 100 million people in the first 6 months, right or wrong? About 100 million people, through starvation, it was total breakdown. It shuts everything electronic off and fries it. It's not like you go get new batteries, not like you get a new chip, it fries it. No cars, no trains, no planes, no ATM machines, no computers, no electronics. Most cars, unless it's pre-1979, they don't run. What happens to the people in the cities? What happens? But honestly, that is one of, correct me if I'm wrong, most people in Intel say that's what they fear the most, because that's the way they'd take us down, because we're completely reliant on a chip, and it puts us back in the Stone Age.
It is our Achilles heel.
It is our Achilles heel, and I fear.
And they've chosen not to protect us against it.
And I fear that it would be the way God would bless us to save us from what this would be, which would be a bigger nightmare for the world. Satan doesn't destroy, he perverts. He takes what's good and he perverts it. This country, with this technology and the resources that we have perverted, we would be a horror show to the people of this world if we don't find our way again and find it soon. Thank you, guys. We'll have you back on again. I think there's a lot more to cover. And thank you guys for coming. Take your backpacks and hunker down. You got to be freaked out. Please, we ask you to do all of your research on this yourself. Look at all of the things that we have told you about, and if you choose not to believe it after you've seen the evidence yourself, well, then that's up to you. You take it as far as you want to go. It's a free country. Back in a minute. Government overreach, we've been talking about it for the last 2 hours, and we've shown you plenty of ways the government is creeping into our lives. Whether you find it a problem or not is up to you. One more example, the Federal Reserve, a pseudo-government agency using its power to dictate economic recovery. Today, the Fed wrapped up its two-day policy meeting, and there's good news. It's expecting interest rates to stay near zero at least through late 2014. At what point will we ask ourselves, is the Fed doing more harm than good to the economy? I have my answer to the question. Maybe you should have yours.